Welcome to Identity Office Hours. I'm your host, Mike Schwartz, founder of Gluu. And today we have a conversation on digital double with Asanka from the CTO of WS02 and Phil Windley, digital identity guru, longtime co-host of Internet Identity Workshop, and now author of second edition O'Reilly book on digital identity called Learning Digital Identity. Everyone needs to order this and have it in their library. So it's a great book and it covers a huge range of topics. So highly recommended. So Asanka, welcome.
Thanks, Mike, and good to meet you, Phil.
And Phil, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Great to be here. Thank you for having us.
So the format is Asanka is the guest, and we're going to talk about the topic that he suggested, which is this metaphor of a digital double. And Phil, you get to ask questions and just provide some like extra experience and or some thoughts as you see fit.
Okay.
So I guess I'll start it out, Asanka, with a question. What is a digital double?
Yes. So I'll give a little bit of a background. In 2016, I got invited to give a keynote in Sri Lanka. So I took this long flight of 18 hours. And I was looking at what should I tell. The topic was about digital experiences. And I was thinking and building my deck. I didn't have an idea what should I tell. So I shut the machine and start watching the movies. And I found this movie called Tron Legacy. Interesting movie. I was watching Tron. And then I realized, hey, there can be a duplicate of a individual thing or a place in the digital universe, and you lose the identity. In the movie, the dad and the son both losing their identity inside the digital universe. So I thought, okay, this is a really good concept. At that time, there was nothing mentioned about the digital twin or digital double type of a concept. So I thought this is a really good way to look at how the digital experiences will look like, and then how the digital identity will look like, and what type of additional stuff we can do to secure the digital identity as well as digital representation of each individual, and how can we extend the digital experience using this concept. So that is how the digital double came into the picture at the conference. I used this analogy of dating app, like you date with people, and inside that world, digital people get communicate with each other. As a result, you will lose the first date because all the digital identities will talk to each other and then match up with each one of them. So that is how the concept came, and that is what the digital double means. Basically, the digital representation of people, things, and places in the digital universe.
I think my kids would love that idea, Gen Z. um, but so Phil, we were talking, I guess, briefly before, and I was surprised to hear. Now you've like I think heard everything because you've been at it for so long. But I was surprised to hear that actually you maybe heard of something parallel to this idea.
Yeah. So I think I read your article in VentureBeat, Asanka, and found it really interesting
Thanks.
because I have advocated for a while that people need to have what I've termed digital embodiment, meaning that we are not first class citizens on the net. We exist only at through the good graces of companies that give us accounts, right? And
Yeah.
and we talk about our Google identity, but that's not really our identity. It's just an account at Google that has some attributes in it. And so, I've long held that we need a place to stand, a place that we can work from in order to really have operational digital lives that are rich and fulfilling.
Yep. I think that's a really good point because even what I believe the identity, that representation should be owned by the person, not by the third part provider. And as you said, unfortunately, still this is not streamlined enough. And we have our identities in various places. And even we don't know how many of these exist. And sometimes even people keep it. Register of things that they have created these IDs in different
Well, I mean,
places.
we have password managers, right? I mean, I've got over 1,000 entries in my password manager, um, and they're all just accounts, right, with the same set of self-attested attributes like my name and whatever that are everywhere else.
Yeah.
How do you think we could capture personality digitally?
Yeah. So I think that is where I was heading in this particular concept because the traditional way of an identity will identify the person as well as what type of activities that we have done in the past. So that's all we have. But it doesn't give the personality. I think that is where the additional attributes required to link to a person, that there are certain things that never changing, right? Like our DNA or our last name. And again, you can change the name, but in most cases we don't. And those type of things that never change, like blood groups, so and so forth. And there are certain things that change uh, not frequently, like nationality. Like we don't change the nationality in frequent intervals, right? And even gender, like it doesn't change in modern world. You can, but it doesn't change. But then again, there are like frequently changing attributes where we are, because we can be here today, we can take a flight and fly somewhere else, we will be at an event, and we can be working for a corporate, we might quit and be a student, right? Those type of frequently changing things are there. So collecting all these things around that particular person, thing, or the place can give a better understanding about the personality. I think if I take one example, Netflix is a really good example. In certain level, they know the personality. As an example, if you go to a specific TV show, the preview you see is not the preview that I see in most cases. It looks the personality in a way and give a very attractive preview and information for that particular person. So we are at some level of personality there. And I think Disney is a really good example as well, how they customize the experiences in some of their theme parks. They are coming there and then giving, trying to do something about the person. And some of the hotel chains, they are trying to do that without asking silly questions every time. Try to understand the person and give some facilities. I don't think we are yet there, but we are getting there. So that's where these attributes around that identity can help for different type of service providers to identify the personality and provide a personalized experience for the end user.
So, if
Yeah,
the digital double is the fusion of your identity and your personality, is that a little bit creepy maybe? If Disney knows not only like who I am, but then joins that with other information about my behavior, maybe that they've projected?
So that's where the most important thing that feel identified at the beginning. Who owns this information? If I own it and if I can control it, I can decide with which service provider I am sharing what type of attributes. So that's where I think the identity and access management should get into. Once we come to that level, then we can do that and control based on the information that we share. If we share more info, then we will get a better experience. But if we don't trust that particular service provider, we can provide them the minimal information. I think the control and consent that we provide for these service providers is really important to find the balance.
Phil, you had a question. Sorry to interrupt.
I was just going to point out that an audience member had asked who would be the overseer of our identity other than government. And it goes on to talk about Google and Azure and others do it now. And I think that's a particularly interesting comment because we're so used to how the current online world works that we assume there has to be an overseer, right? We assume there has to be someone else. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to have hosting providers or others who help us, manage things. But I think overseer is a particularly telling word there because I don't necessarily think there should be any overseer. I think we should be the overseer of our own digital existence. And one of the things I liked in your article, Askana, you termed these geocentric and heliocentric, which I thought was an interesting analogy, right? So the geocentric model is what we have now, right? Where there is an overseer of our identity, an identity provider, so to speak, which is an awful word because they don't provide you with an identity. You already have an identity. You don't need someone to provide it to you. But nevertheless, that's the word we use, right? And then you term the place or the model where we own our identity, or owns a funny word. Let's not say own, let's say control, where we control our digital identity. You term that the heliocentric model, kind of playing on Galileo's argument. So anyway, talk more about that. How do you see the heliocentric model working?
Yeah, so I think so that's where we are circling back to that we control the identity as you mentioned. At the moment, it is controlled by a third party, and we let them to control it. So two problems. One is this duplication of the identity. And then the second problem is centralized identities, right? There's no decentralized like identity fabric or identity mesh type of a concept yet widely used in the industry. So unfortunately, these things are centralized in different places. So we can't handle it in an identity mesh or identity fabric type of a, environment. So as long as we can get there and then have that unique identity for the person, thing, or a place, then we can get into that heliocentric model. And that is the ideal place. And in a way, that's a right we have, right? It's our identity and it's our attributes, and we should have the control of it, not a third party. So I think as a human, we have that right to do, but unfortunately, we are not yet there.
Yeah, I agree. And to take that question just a little bit further, identity is how we recognize, remember, and react to other people, places, things online, right? In the digital, right? And the problem with the geocentric model is it gives us no ability to recognize and remember. It doesn't give us tools to do those things, right? The only tool we have is our head, and then we are responsible for using a keyboard to put things in a browser. Now, of course, companies, they have teams of people who build systems, and they can buy systems that recognize, remember, and react to other people and things. I like to say that the reason we build identity systems is not to manage identity, but to manage relationships. And that's, I think where you're going, Asanka, is we need to give people tools that allow them to recognize and remember others and build relationships on their own without any intermediating authority like a Google or an Azure or someone else who is in the middle of the relationship.
Yeah. Exactly. I think that's where some of the supportive technologies will come and play a role. As an example, the integrations, because we need to integrate with different systems, right? If you can remember this standard called SACML, didn't succeed. But one thing I like with SACML, the SACML architecture with the PDP and PEP and PIPs, like policy information points, nicely kind of connect everything together and then provide you a single view, right? So like that, if we have these integrations across the identity systems and into different type of systems and subsystems that we are working on, then I can create that particular connections, uh, information exchange, and the control to the individuals. I think there are few um, initiatives. One thing that I noticed, W3C introduced this thing called decentralized identity specification. I wasn't sure how much succeed that, but I saw it as a good initiative, at least that we can document everything, and then there's a way to store these additional attributes into identity and use it. So I think we are getting there, but as you said, we don't have tools. Again, when it comes to tools, who's the user, right? Not a person who got a computer science background should be able to only handle it. I think general public who has some IT literacy should be able to handle these tools, and it has to be simplified to that level as well. So that's another problem. People see some of these things are very dangerous things to touch because they don't understand the semantics and nuances behind some of these tools that we see today.
I think you're thinking of DIDs, digital or decentralized identifiers.
Yeah.
And actually making a little pitch for IAW, there was a very interesting presentation by Stephen Curran from the BC government about a new DID method for the web to connect or to use the web. DIDs are just identifiers. What makes DIDs useful are the corresponding DID methods, which return metadata about that identifier, which enable applications to do things. And DIDs are quite flexible in the different use cases that they could address. And maybe, Phil, I'll put you on the spot for a second, and you could talk a little bit about, in the article, Asanka mentions one of the challenges about these new identity systems is the lack of like a primary key or a way to identify people or entities on the networks. And maybe you can give some of your thoughts, Phil, on where that is evolved.
Yeah. So I think you just talked about DIDs, decentralized identifiers, and I think that's one of the key, no pun intended, one of the key ideas in this space is, as I said before, I think we build identity systems to manage relationships, and Asanka and I have not met before this podcast, right? So we didn't need Google to like create a system for us to do that, right? And we saw each other, I recognize him, we created a relationship. Now, right now, it's a fairly shallow relationship based on 20 minutes of talking on a podcast, but nevertheless, it is a relationship, and that could get deeper. But what happened is we exchanged identifiers. Now, in a biological sense, that's weird to talk about us exchanging identifiers, but in fact, we did, right? I mean, he has a face print of me, I have a face print of him, and I'm getting older, so mine doesn't remember as well as it used to, but nevertheless, that's what happened. So I think that's exactly what DIDs allow us to do. DIDs allow, I can create a DID. We talk about them. I call them autonomic, in the sense that I can create it and create the keys that control it and give it to Asanka. Asanka can create a DID on his own system and give it to me.
Yeah.
And the only I think the big magic of decentralized identifiers is that they provide a level of indirection to the keys. Right. So the reason why they work better than using just a public private key pair in this instance is that you can rotate the keys underneath them without changing the identifier. Right. So Asanka and I have exchanged DIDs. And if Asanka believes that for some reason his key has been exposed, he can rotate that without jeopardizing the relationship that we have. And we can use that peer relationship with these DIDs, first of all, just to send send messages to each other, and using that messaging system, we could do other things like exchange credentials, which may be self-asserted or they may come from somewhere else. So, in this situation, Asanka is probably happy to have me tell him my name is Phil. If this were a banking relationship, he might need a little bit more proof than just me telling him my name, right?
Yeah.
So the type of relationship tells us what kinds of information we want to exchange, but that's what I think we're talking about when we talk about giving people the tools necessary to create and manage their own relationships. Right? They need tools to create DIDs, exchange DIDs, manage them, and to Asanka's point, it can't be complicated, right? The customer experience has to be simple and easy and feel natural.
Exactly. And I think, Phil, you are spot on there. And for the people who's building those tools, one thing that I noticed, the architecture of blockchain can be utilized a lot, because my generic feeling about blockchain is very negative because of the way it's used in various stuff. But as architecture style and a pattern, there are a lot of things that we can take, and that exchange that you explain can be nicely implemented using some of these blockchain architecture principles. Now, when I dig in deep into the architecture, that's something that I noticed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
blockchain is one way to do it. And it has certain benefits and features. But like Mike was mentioning, the DID method that Stephen Curran talked about is based on Web X.509 certificates,
Yeah.
DNS. So there are other ways of doing it. I think we can trade off, technically all of the differences and figure out what the right thing is. But yeah, we need some way of having those relationships and remembering who people are.
It's hard not to comment on Web3 and John, but so, I love a quote. It was Tim Berners-Lee said, my web's already decentralized without blockchain. And I think that's really interesting point, that the domain and DNS system is really based on decentralization. Although we have seen some centralization because the web is reliant on TLS, and how many CAs are there. So if we're all getting Let's Encrypt certificates, maybe it's not as decentralized as we think.
Yeah.
But with that said, I actually feel like the crypto crash has been, in a way, liberating for the technical people, because we can focus on what blockchain is good at and not look at blockchain as a panacea for every problem under the sun, which I feel like was the approach. It was like a hammer and everything looked like a nail in the last couple of years. And I feel like maybe it's come back to reality, but it's still a useful tool. Maybe we can figure out how. But I'm curious, maybe, Asanka, what features of Web3 and blockchain you think could be useful here?
Yeah, I think the bunch of things. One is like how we store this information, how we build the relationships, and then the messaging part, right? How we notify each other, as well as providing consent in a network effect way. So those type of fundamental requirements that we can simplify it, because as I said, like blindly we should not pick blockchain or DID, because even I'm very careful when we pick these things. Even like if you look at as the architecture style microservices, right? A lot of theory, but if somebody wants to use it properly, they can carefully look at the good things within the architecture style and then use it like that. Some of those complex scenarios have abstracted in these architecture styles. So based on the implementation, we can steal some of these concepts.
Maybe steering back to SIAM, or Customer Identity and Access Management, how do you think that enterprises could benefit from this type of metaphor or technology?
Yeah, I think so. That's where like some of the organizations, they are going behind these systems like customer journey mapping, and then trying to duplicate this effort to identify the personality of individuals. So that's where CIAM can, or the customer identity and access management, can tie in with identity access management, because at identity access management level, we already have the identity about people, places, and things. So it's a matter of bringing this additional attribute. So that's where CIAM can come as a concept. So the organization can leverage the IAM system and bring CIAM as a capability to bring the personalization related capabilities to the digital implementation. So that way, they will maintain one system, and then they can provide different type of access. I mean, APIs, SDKs for the application developers to get these attributes in a secured way and plug them inside the applications that they are building. So I think the best way to merge the security and the personality, I think incorporate this into the customer identity and access management.
Yeah, I've had heard people remark that, you know, Web3 or self-sovereign identity, or decentralized identity, whatever you want to call it, that's going to be the end to company identity systems, and that's just not true, right? Because the fact is, if we're going to have a relationship with, I have a relationship with Amazon, right? I buy stuff from them. If I'm going to have a relationship with Amazon, that relationship implies that we need to recognize and remember each other. They have to have systems to recognize and remember me the same way I have to have systems to recognize and remember them, right? So I don't think it means that the SIAM systems go away, but they could change in some significant ways. When I bring this up, sometimes people say, well, every company just wants all your data. And that is certainly true of many companies, but not all companies want all your data. Deacon St. John or St. John Deacon, sorry, has a interesting term for this, and he calls it zero data. Right, the idea that if I can provide just in time, reliably authentic proof about attributes that whoever I'm engaged with cares about, and I can do that anytime they ask for it, they don't necessarily need to store all of my data, right? We're used to companies online storing our data because really that's the only way it could have worked. I mean, we've been building these systems for 30 years now, and we kind of all started with this identity centric model. We store everybody's things in accounts, but I think there's a lot of room for SIAM systems to evolve to hold a lot less data about people, because when I show up, I can prove to you the things you need to know. And so you don't, and it's convenient for me. It's not like I have to type a bunch of stuff into a form. I just push a button and you now have all the data you need in order to give me service. So you don't need to store it all the time. Will companies still store data? Sure. But a lot of companies would rather not have that burden, I think.
Agree. Yeah. Even I can remember like when pandemic started, we used to use this video visits since we couldn't visit the doctors. And there's a way that what set of information that I should share temporarily with a specific physician. And it was really cool because I didn't want to change everything about me with a specific physician. So as you said, I think that's a cool way that how we kind of time bound some of the information as well as only share the necessary information about
Yeah.
each individual.
WSO2 has some pretty deep experience in building middleware and service meshes, and I'm wondering if you see any parallels between your expertise in that area and overlapping with some of these new challenges in digital identity.
Yeah, so traditionally, yes, we started the company in 2005 when service-oriented architecture was the main thing, and had three products: an enterprise service bus, governance registry, and a application server to host web services. So that's how the company started, and we evolved like with the market changes from the business and technology side. But at some point, we identified there are three things that acting as the foundation for any digital infrastructure: integrations, APIs, and identities. So identity and access management. So then we shift the company focus on looking at these three areas and building products on these three. So we have a set of products on API management, and we have a set of products in integration, and we have a set of products on identity and access management. So we started with identity and access management and extended the capabilities to support customer identity and access management. So that's where I introduced the concept of the digital double to our identity team when they were looking at CIM.
Yeah.
Do you see this addressing some specific areas of customer challenges or customer pain?
Yeah, because actually bunch of things. Because when it comes to security, identity, it's a mess inside the enterprise, right? Various IDPs, various user stores everywhere inside organizations, and then the acquisitions are mergers are common in today's business context, right? So it is getting worse when that happens and bringing another stuff. So things like identity federation, helping to address some of those challenges. And then, as I said, sometimes this integration is very important to build a proper identity and access management system. So these technologies are supporting to do that, our integration stuff as well as API management stuff. And then about CIAM, what we noticed, everybody is working on this digital transformation, right? Either it can be an internal transformation or an external transformation. Internal transformation means that you are building digital experiences to employees, and external transformation is basically for the end users and partners who's consuming the services. So when you do that, having a clean identity and access management systems, on top of that, having customer identity and access management to understand the person, is helping a lot for them to build these different type of digital experiences. Because in the modern business context, the unique digital experiences that you are delivering is your differentiator. Like as example, if I am using two delivery service providers, both might be doing the same service at the same cost, but if I get a better digital experience with how the notifications works, how I can track the package, I will go with the better digital experience, right? So that is where enterprises are heading to. So how we can simplify the creation of digital experiences, how they can quickly deliver these digital experiences is very important. So there, the CIAM and IAM features are helping a lot for them to have a steady role in their journey.
One of the things that I agree with that, and one of the things I liked in the article that you wrote was this idea of, you called it the identity mesh. And that kind of related to another question that somebody asked in the chat about our attributes and personalities falling into major buckets. How unique is it really? How many can we feasibly capture? Because I think that idea of mesh, right? The idea of an identity mesh kind of goes to this very question. It's not just about a bucket of attributes, although I think we could argue that everybody has a unique set of attributes, but that's not really the point. It's the relationships. It's this mesh, right?
Yeah.
Our relationships create this mesh, not just with companies, but with each other, right? I mean, right now there's I don't know very many digital ways that we could have a relationship online, except by the auspices of some company, right? We could be friends on Facebook. We can be connections on X. We can, connect on LinkedIn, whatever. But if we just wanted to have a conversation, really the best way for us to do that without some other company being in the middle of it is email. Right?
Yeah.
It's been around forever. People keep saying email will die. It won't, because it's the only tool we have right now that allows us to create these peer-to-peer relationships. And I think that is the key idea to this, to your identity mesh point, is that it's not just that we have a relationship with a company. And clearly, I think from an enterprise standpoint, yeah, they're going to want to have their SIAM, and they're going to want to create some sort of bucket for us and all of those things. But in reality, if you look at the heliocentric view, where we are controlling our own set of relationships and sharing the attributes we want with those are all unique. Everybody's relationships are unique. The way they manage those relationships is unique, and that's one of the things that makes us uniquely human, I think, and a key to letting us have effective digital lives.
Indeed, I think so. Why I thought about the identity mesh, because we had these same challenges when it comes to connectivity. So service mesh addressed most of those issues, and then we had the same issue at the data level. So the data mesh as a concept addressed those things, and event mesh. So I thought same principles can apply here, and if we can move to an identity mesh. So two things. One is, as you said, these relationships and how those communication happens, as well as how we can simplify it to the developers who is building applications, right? How they can quickly access this stuff in a very secured way and managed way, so they can build these enterprise experiences into the applications. A problem in some of the enterprises, the application developers, they don't have access because that infrastructure is not there, at least to expose these things as an API. So I think a mesh will address that problem to a great extent.
The point that Phil made about email is really interesting. Of course, email is correlatable. So while it's federated, I can send anybody an email without any pre-existing trust relationship. So in that way, it's kind of ideal. On the other hand, it's correlatable and overused. But it raises one other interesting point, which I want to talk about. I've been posting jobs. We're hiring at Gluu. and I'm getting a lot of AI generated responses from applicants. And it's hard for me to tell the applicants apart, and they're using the same examples, so I know they're using the same AI. And likewise in email, we've noticed at Glue that emails become a lot less effective these days because people are using AI to sort their email better. So because you get so much email, you just need help. In a way, you need a digital double to read your email and sort it into folders. And sometimes that sorting results in me actually missing stuff or customers missing notifications that are important even when there's so I wonder if this applies in the digital double world. If I have a digital double and that's basically an AI and it's talking to somebody else's digital double and that's an AI, um, are they really going to be able to, is it really going to, can I trust it enough as a person to really effectively help me? And so I don't know, maybe that's two questions in one,
I,
but Asanka, or
yeah,
sorry, Phil, go on.
Yeah, Phil, go
if I
ahead.
can jump in, I think it's a mistake to jump too quickly to the idea that your digital double is an AI. I think we use the singular, we call it a digital double, but in fact, I view it as a collection of tools that I wield in order to manage my online relationships and have an online existence. And yes, I might have agents that are rule based. I might have agents that are AI based. I might have all of those things, plus things that I control myself. And I think people are going to take a mix of those. And to your point about getting resumes that are AI generated, LLM generated. Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna have to find some balance there. But I wouldn't think of a digital double as a single thing like an AI that works on my behalf. I think it's a whole constellation of tools that I use.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, yeah, there are like physical to physical relationships, physical to digital relationships, and then what Mike mentioned, digital, right? So I think, I feel you are spot on there because there's a human in the loop somewhere that we control it. AI can support it, AI can optimize it, and we can give the consent to the digital double to make certain decisions behalf of us, but still there's a human in the loop. So like I think things are evolving, but as I said and Phil mentioned, I think there's a human in the loop somewhere, at least in the current context.
Well, maybe that's a good place to wrap it up. I just want to make a pitch for our next episode. We'll have Ian Glazer and Vlad Shapiro talking about zero standing privilege, which I guess is one step beyond zero trust, even. And Ian's always a great speaker and formerly a Gartner analyst, formerly a Salesforce leader in identity. And Vlad is will be co-hosting, and he brings a great enterprise perspective on access management and some of the real world challenges of like in the trenches, how does this actually work. So that'll be on Thursday. And thank you, Asanka, so much for joining us today. I know it's late. And thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for
Yeah,
inviting me and hosting it. You are a great moderator, and good luck with the show. Phil, I learned a lot, and you gave a lot of ideas for me to write the next article on digital double. Thanks for that.
yeah. Well, it was great to be here. Thanks to both of you. I enjoyed it a lot.
And remember, everyone, Learning Digital Identity, O'Reilly book. This is the essential book for you to have in your library as a identity or identity to be. So thanks, Phil, for writing that. I know that that's no easy task, having written a book myself, but not one as good as this. So anyway, everyone should get that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. And thanks, everyone, for joining in, and we'll see you on Thursday.